Welcome back to Just Chattin. And this is the series of videos we do on Thursday and Sunday evenings just for our own entertainment. So for all you Audie fans, he is in the bedroom, sound asleep. Yeah, such a hard life that poor cat has. He's, I think, gotten past the fact that I've released his baby bunnies. He's not looking for them anymore. That's good. He's not yelling at me about it anymore. That's better. And I guess we're just going to have to hope that he moves on. I think he's in the process of doing that now. So that's all the Audie news. We are going to just take a quick look at the intro and we will be right back. So I thought we would talk about the sock puppet this evening. He is apparently going to be appearing in the UK at a charity, Children in Need, that's the name of the charity, and he will be announcing a substantial donation. Yeah, right, like we've never seen that before. Now, I have no idea if, in fact, he is actually going to make a donation, if he is simply going to announce a donation, if he is going to say how much money it's going to be or where the money is coming from. Because, quite frankly, we hear about their substantial donations and their promises, and they were going to pledge all of the revenues of that elephant documentary that Disney made and Nutmeg narrated. Never heard anything about that. We heard that a portion of the proceeds from the sale of the sock puppet's autobiography, Spare, were going to send to Bali. We don't know about that. And so am I excited about this? Oh, not even close. Because they are constantly saying they are going to be making donations. And if they are, in fact, making any donations, generally speaking, we never get any details. It's never stated how much money was donated, and it's never stated where that money comes from. Is that their own money? Are they writing those checks, or are they dipping into the charitable contributions of other people and taking credit for it? Or who knows? Remember the NAACP award? They received an award for $10,000 and donated an award for $10,000. You see how that works? Yeah, charitable contribution or three-card Monty, your guess. The fact is, we don't know. And I'm so tired of listening to the media touting their significant contributions, and that's the end of it. It's never a contribution of X number of thousands of dollars. It's never, and this money came from their Archie Well charity. This money came from them personally. You know, they signed the check. No. It's PR. That's all there is to it. And I am mightily sick of this. But I did want to mention it, because it's in the news. Meanwhile, there is another interesting story floating around, and this, by the way, is floating around on both sides of the Atlantic. Apparently, an American podcaster decided to share her opinion on whether or not Nutmeg and the sock puppet would be returning to the UK and under what circumstances. So I don't know anything about this podcaster except that she is supposed to be an award-winning podcaster who works in the field of cultural commentary. Now, cultural commentary, as nearly as I can tell, and I have tried to look this up, is the same general category that used to be referred to as arts and entertainment. So, maybe she has an opinion. Who knows? But I don't want to unfairly savage the woman. The comments were made on a podcast. I haven't heard the podcast, and I'm not going out of my way to. This is not anything that's of interest to me. But for all I know, she could have been hit off guard with a question out of left field and just babbled off the first thing that came to her head. This is not a person who specializes in international affairs or reporting on the royal family or anything like that. Culture commentary is probably more along the lines of Hollywood celebrity gossip, in which case, if she's answering questions out of her wheelhouse, I'm not going to fault her for it. However, because so many periodicals are quoting this, I thought we would just take a look at one of them. And I'm choosing this. This is from The Hill. And the reason I am choosing this is because, well, they read the story for me. I always like that. And it's literally 90 seconds long. So let's listen to this. Here you go.
Harry and Meghan would consider resuming royal duties. Report by Teddy Grant. Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, could be returning to their royal duties, according to an award-winning podcaster. Culture critic Kristen Mainzer spoke to the Daily Express UK and said that it was never Prince Harry's intention to give up his responsibilities as a senior royal. Harry has repeatedly said that it was never his intention to completely surrender his senior royal duties, Mainzer said. She added, in a perfect world, Harry and Meghan would have been able to move forward with passion projects while serving the crown, like Prince Edward, Harry's uncle, and his wife Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. The nightly host said that it was the late Queen Elizabeth II's decision to allow Harry and Meghan to completely leave their royal duties and move to the US, and did not offer the Duke and Duchess of Sussex the opportunity to pursue their passions. But the Queen did not grant Harry and Meghan the same opportunity, nor did the institution treat the racism Meghan faced with the seriousness it warranted, Mainzer said. Prince Harry and King Charles' aides meet. News Nation's Paula Froelich reported in July that representatives for Prince Harry and Meghan met with one of King Charles' aides, hinting at a royal truce. According to Mainzer, despite Queen Elizabeth II not allowing them to pursue projects, King Charles might. If he arranged for their duties to have both some flexibility and a great deal of safety, I think Harry and Meghan would certainly consider accepting the opportunity, she said.
So, I guess this podcaster seems to believe that if Nutmeg and the Sock Puppet get that flexible schedule they want, so they only have to do the high-profile appearances that they want to do, the ones with loads and loads and loads of press and adoring crowds, and if the British government will pay for all their security so they get the bells and the whistles and the internationally protected person status, maybe they'll consider coming back. Wow. Oh, wait, sorry. They have to be free to follow the bucks, too. Yeah, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. Of course they would be willing to come back. Duh. Okay. That's the last of my comments on that particular podcaster. I think it speaks for itself. However, I was very intrigued by the reference to Sophie and Edward, that Sophie and Edward were allowed to follow their passion projects. Well, I wouldn't put it that way. Please remember, I was around back in the 90s when this stuff was going on. So yeah, I remember. Edward, in the 90s, was the fourth child of the Queen. He was the third of her sons, so that put him ahead of Anne in what has to be just a nuclear level injustice. Not against Edward, but we all know Anne should have been first in line. The fact is, he was seventh in line, so he decided he was going to get a job. He was going to go out and work for a living. He wanted a life outside of, the royal family, the working life of that family. Good for him. He started a documentary film company, and I have seen a number of his documentaries, this whole series, Crown and Country, I think it was called. I don't recall. It was a long time ago. And yes, I watched as many of them as I could because it was British history. And Edward had access to some of the buildings that wouldn't ordinarily have been accessed by documentary film crews. So yeah, glued to the television when that was on. I found him to be a very good presenter. He was knowledgeable, he was articulate, and he was charming. The man exudes likability. He really does. And that, as Nutmeg is finding out, much to her dismay, that's a key factor in putting on a television program. You have to be likable. Doesn't matter how good you are at what you are doing, not to suggest I think Nutmeg is good at what she's doing, but doesn't matter how good you are. If people don't like you, your show is not going to be successful. Well, Edward was both. He was very good at what he was doing. He was very likable. And I thought his programs were great. And keep in mind, this is a very niche market. British royal history from the 10th century. Like, seriously, it was like this, there were like me and 4 other people glued to our television sets for this. By the way, if you ever have a chance to watch it, I would suggest you do so. It was good. He made other documentaries as well. So it's important to keep in mind that this was real work. This wasn't like he was pretending to make documentaries or sitting in an office all day long, playing on the computer. Yes, we had computers in those days. I had to think back for a moment. He wasn't playing computer games all day long. He was actually in front of the camera, as well as being a co-owner of this production company. So yeah, it was not a passion project. This was his job. He was getting paid to do this. And he was performing a service. If one considers the entertainment industry a service, one certainly must consider educational entertainment to be probably the high end of the service that the entertainment industry provides. Meanwhile, Sophie had a public relations company. She was a partner in the firm. She and her partner founded the firm, and she was doing PR work. When they married, and they married in 1999, they sat down with the Queen and said, we want to keep working, which made sense. They were a young couple. They didn't have children, and they were so far down in the line of succession with the prospect of only going further and further down the line. It was very, very likely at that time that Sophie and Edward would be completely superfluous to the British royal family. Okay, so they worked. And then in 2001, there was an unfortunate incident in which people went in to Sophie's PR firm purporting to be people in need of public relations services. Meanwhile, they were recording conversations between Sophie, her partner, and Sophie ended up making some relatively harmless, and I've actually read the transcripts. I know what she said. We're talking some relatively harmless but indiscreet statements. She was not kind to the British Prime Minister, and she allegedly called the late Queen the old dear. However, like I say, I went through the transcripts. I'm not sure if, in fact, she was calling Queen Elizabeth II the old dear, or if she was referring to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, as the old dear. I couldn't tease that out of the transcripts because she was speaking about both women at that time. Anyway, at worst, her comments were unguarded and nothing serious. There was no bribery. There was no effort to sell access to the royal family. like some other royal in-laws I might mention, and I probably will. We'll get to that later, though. But this hit the papers because this was a setup. These people, pretending to be Middle Eastern oil magnates, went in with the intent to trap Sophie in indiscreet statements and publish them. Oh, and they did. They did. They didn't have too much they could lay at her doorstep. But because these were comments made about members of her family, her mother-in-law, well, the Prime Minister wasn't a member of her family, but comments about her mother-in-law and her husband's grandmother. Yeah, indiscreet, ill-advised, would have been a lot better if she had never said it. What was the upshot? Well, the upshot is that a lot of the tabloids who greatly exaggerated what Sophie had said, because, as I say, it was mostly harmless. There was nothing I think was really bad, really. A lot of the tabloids had to apologize to Sophie. However, within about 18 months, she and Edward both had to leave their jobs, which was not as simple as, here's my 2-week notice, I'm leaving. They were both partners, owners in their business, so they had to not just stop working, they had to divest themselves of their business interests and hopefully do it in such a way that they did not cause financial distress for their partners who would have been forced to buy them out, or any undue inconvenience to the people around them. So it's not like they could have just said, I quit, walk away. It took time to extricate themselves in a way that was decent to the people around them. And I would say, subsequently, we've had 25 years of watching these two as working royals. I think it's a safe bet to say they were going to do it in the most respectful way, the way that would least negatively impact their partners. So they pulled out. And this apparently is the template that this podcaster is using for Nutmeg and the Sock Puppet. Well, the lesson that everyone, including the late Queen, learned from this is you can't be both in and out. No, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. She tried it with Sophie and Edward, and not only did it not work, but it didn't work in the most flamboyant way possible, all over the tabloids. I shouldn't say the most flamboyant way possible. The most flamboyant way possible was when Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, and she and Andrew divorced. She went off and sold access to Andrew. And there's no question that she did that. She was recorded. I've read those transcripts. She said what they said she said. And she admitted it. She said, I'm sorry, I was in a bad place. I take full responsibility. And to her credit, she did not try to wriggle her way out of it. She just basically said that she was just in a very bad emotional state. She threw herself on the mercy of the public. And interestingly enough, she found the public was pretty merciful. But she was actually selling access. You bring me $5,000 in a suitcase and I'll get you in to see my ex-husband. After the incident with Sophie and the incident with Fergie, the Queen said, no half in, half out. Can't do that. So using those as examples of, well, the Queen let Edward and Sophie do it. That's like when your kid looks at you and says, but Billy's mom lets him do that. And you have to look at your kid and say, yeah, Billy is 6 years older than you are, you little squirt. The fact is that it is a ridiculous ridiculous comparison because it torpedoes the whole notion that one can be half in and half out. This is why the Queen knew it couldn't happen, because, yeah, they tried it. They failed. That's the part that was left out of that podcast, apparently. Oh, yeah. So I thought it was worth taking a quick look at this, because even though we've probably covered this before, because I rather like Sophie and Edward, I think they have done a wonderful job at the time when they were working out in the public. At that time, the royal family had an absolute glut of working royals. There was the Queen. The Queen had 4 children. The 4 children had spouses, etc., etc. Then, on top of that, which is just the immediate family, you had all of the Queen's first cousins, the people of her generation, who had been working royals, people like the Duke of Kent, the Duke of Gloucester, etc. That elder generation, some of whom are still with us now, which is lovely. Tons of working royals. Remember, it is after this period that Charles had said he wanted to streamline the working royals, cut down on the number of people that would be on the civil list that would be actively representing the monarchy. So they had royals to spare. They didn't need Edward. They didn't need Sophie. They were young, just married, and free to continue working if they wanted to. And by the way, we have to throw this in. The late Queen did say Nutmeg could continue working if she wanted to as well. So she really did get that same offer. Sorry, you can't say there was a double standard. What they can't have is the half in, half out. What they can't have is pursuing financial goals while representing the royal family. By the way, Sophie and Edward didn't have that. Sophie and Edward were not working royals while they were out in the world pursuing their financial interests. Just saying. So we have a complete distortion of the facts. And that distortion is being repeated in the media again and again and again. And that's why I think it's important. And I've said this before. When we hear the lies and the misrepresentations, we need to call them out. And our friends in the UK are probably sitting back saying, but Sue, this is old news. We were all there. We all remember, which is probably very, very true. But my friends in the US, even if we were around during that period, not all of us were particularly interested in what was going on in the royal family at that time. And I happened to be interested because, like I say, I was following Edward's documentaries. That was really interesting to me. So, sure, I got interested in other aspects of his life, which is how it happened that I was following these events. I think most of the people in the U.S., and remember, this podcaster is in the U.S., I think most of us in the U.S. were completely unaware of this. Most of us probably didn't know that there was a time when Edward and Sophie worked outside of the royal family. And most of us probably don't know why they had to stop. Well, here you go. This is why they had to stop. And I do believe that Fergie was an additional layer that played into this. But the fact is, she was not a working royal. She was the ex-wife of Andrew at that time. Well, still is now, although they're living together. I can't even begin to speculate on what's going on in that marriage. That is one of the most bizarre marriages I have ever encountered. But yeah, if it works for them, what can I say? I do, however, think that it's probably a good thing that Andrew is no longer a working royal, because he's got Fergie in his life, and Fergie, unfortunately, did attempt to sell her connection with Andrew for money. She can sell it all she pleases now, but nobody's buying. So I think in the end, net, it probably worked out in a way that's making the two of them happy, so more power to them. All right, I did want to clear that situation up. As always, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Those of you in the UK who remembered this incident, because these things were playing out from, I guess, 1999, when Edward and Sophie were first married, up till 2002, when they were both fully extricated from their private business ventures. And so we've got probably about a 3 or 4 year period here in which they were out in the community working. What was your take on it? These are your royals. Did this disturb you that they were working? Were you okay with it? Like I said, I was totally okay with it. I love those documentaries. And again, Edward having access to things other documentary filmmakers might not have had access to, that was just a nice little plus. And I don't think that was in any way abusive. I think that one of the functions of the royal family in the UK is to open that history, open the doors of those castles and palaces to all of us, because at least in the English-speaking world, it is part of our shared history. So I loved it. Let me know what you think. What was your take on it at the time? Do you remember it? How did you feel about it? Did you think that Sophie's few offhand comments were worse than I thought? Because I didn't think they were that bad. So, yes, looking forward to hearing from you. We are going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I hope to see you next time. And in the meanwhile, have a terrific day.